Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark. I'm here with my co host, Real, and welcome back to episode 2 of America First Insight Unfiltered. Today we have a guest, Gabe. Gabe, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for having me on. It's a privilege to be here on your second episode. It looks like. My name is Gabe Guidarini. I have a few different roles. I'm 20 years old, out of Ohio. I go to University of Dayton, in Dayton, Ohio. I'm the president of the College Republicans there. Work for a number of organizations, but primarily for the focus of this call, I'll be focusing on from my position as College Republicans president at the University of Dayton, and then also comms director for the Ohio College Republican Federation. I was also formerly the acting president, and then before that, vice president for College Republicans of America, which is the national organization for the College Republicans. Prior to that, I worked for a number of different campaigns, including J.D. Vance when he was running for Senate here in Ohio about 3 years ago at this point. I'm happy to share my insights.
What a resume. What a resume. All right. We're here on the second episode. We're going to kind of be focusing a lot on several topics. But first off, the most recent thing is we got confirmation that tonight at midnight, J.D. Vance will officially resign and no longer be senator, which is very sad. And so that means we're going to start off talking who's going to replace Vance. Now, Gabe, you're from Ohio, so you probably have the best pulse on the situation. What do you think DeWine's going to do?
Yeah, so for a little context here, I mean, here's the thing about Governor DeWine. There's sort of a rift within Ohio GOP politics. It's been going on for a while now, where you look at a governor like Mike DeWine. Mike DeWine's, he'd be good in a blue state, but for a state as red as Ohio, and Ohio is used to be a swing state. Now it's a lot more red since the Trump revolution. Obviously, Ohio is a very blue collar, working class state, and the people here are much more driven to those populist America First ideas that Trump first brought into the equation back in 2016. But when you're looking at a governor like Mike DeWine, he's kind of on the other end of the GOP spectrum than the Trump element, right? He's a little bit more moderate on the issues. He tends to favor establishmentarian, old school Republican ideas and doctrines versus the new school Trump type of stuff. And that really shows on a number of different things. There's been quite a few incidents where Governor DeWine has been in conflict with the GOP conservative base in the state. There was an incident in which Governor DeWine, it was last year, Governor DeWine vetoed a bill that was passed by the Ohio General Assembly. It was essentially an anti-trans in students on sports teams and in bathrooms and stuff like that. He vetoed that bill, and then thankfully they overrode his veto. And there's a number of different things like this. The COVID lockdowns too, his COVID lockdown policies were very, they were not typical for a conservative. They were very restrictive. They were very much closer to what a Democrat would do in that situation. And so when you're looking at how he did in 2022, he ran for re-election in 2022. He lost a majority of the voters. He won the primary, but he only got a plurality of the vote. And that was because his opposition was split between two different candidates. That was Jim Renacci and Joe Blystone. And so for that reason, he doesn't really have the strongest mandate among Republican voters in the state. And that's going to guide a lot of his decision making when it comes to appointing this next successor to J.D. Vance. When J.D. Vance was first running for Senate in 2022, the establishment pick wasn't J.D. Vance. It was Matt Dolan. Before that, it was Jane Timken. But it ended up being that Matt Dolan was the establishment candidate. And so J.D. Vance was never the establishment pick. And in 2024, when it came to the primary for Senate, obviously Bernie Moreno won that primary, and Bernie Moreno was a Trump pick. He's a very strong conservative guy. But Governor DeWine endorsed Matt Dolan, and the establishment backed Matt Dolan in that race against Bernie Moreno. Generally speaking, there were some people that were on either side within the establishment, but generally it was Matt Dolan. And so when you're looking at what's going to go on this year, there's three main people that have been brought up to replace J.D. Vance, people that Governor DeWine may appoint. There's three main ones. The first is his own Lieutenant Governor, John Husted. Now, I know John Husted. I know a lot of his people. John Husted is the current Lieutenant Governor. He was a Dayton Flyer alumni, which is pretty relevant to me. But he's a lot more like the governor. He tends to be more on the establishmentarian side of things. He tends to be more on the the standard line when it comes to that stuff. It's relevant that he might pick Husted because Husted was initially going to run for governor, right? The initial consensus was that the governor's race to replace Mike DeWine in 2026, because he's term limited, that race would end up being a brawl between Lieutenant Governor Husted and a more conservative, or at least generally the consensus is that he's more conservative, Attorney General Dave Yost. And even possibly a challenge from Vivek Ramaswamy, who might jump in as well. But some people were starting to wonder whether Lieutenant Governor Husted could win that primary, given he's not seen as the most conservative choice by a lot of the conservative community in the state. And so putting him into the Senate position, in our eyes, seems like a way of safely, keeping his career alive without the risk that comes with running in a competitive governor primary. And so he's being seen as, he's been pushing for it, according to people on the ground. He's been pushing very heavily for this position. Lieutenant Governor Husted really wants it. And he seems to be the front runner for the role. The runner-up, in my eyes, would be Secretary of State Frank LaRose. Frank ran in the... he ran for Senate last year. He didn't win the primary. But he's been a very good Secretary of State in my eyes. In my eyes, I would say he would be, from a conservative perspective, the best possible choice that could be made for the Senate appointment, because he has a track record, right? He fights pretty hard on the issues. And I wouldn't consider him very strongly aligned with the Trump element. He would be more similar to a Ron DeSantis in terms of his doctrine when it comes to politics is just to get things done. And I think that's really good. And I think that he would be a pretty good choice for a senator out of the choices that you have. And I know that he was gunning for it too, but I don't think that he's a front runner right now. The third choice is Jane Timken. Jane Timken used to be the Ohio Republican Party chair. And right now she is the national committee woman for the Ohio Republican Party at the RNC, at the national RNC. And she was appointed by the state central committee and all those people. And so she's very much a party bigwig, right? She was never really voted on by anybody. She's never won a competitive race. She ran for Senate in 2022 in the primary. She got, I think it was 5th place. She got 5th place in that primary despite being the front runner for the first year. And so she probably, I could assume she would really want that Senate seat again. And she's considered the most establishmentarian pick, I would say. And she was the early front runner for the role. I think people were really seeing that she would be the front runner for the role, especially since there were some reports that said that Mike DeWine was specifically looking for a woman for the role of Senate to replace J.D. Vance. But I don't know if that would be the case right now, because everyone's talking about Husted. So those are the three main choices. I would say from a conservative perspective, from my perspective, I like Frank LaRose the best. I think that he would be the best to fulfill that role. But for any of them, it would really be just a test to see, how they, if they were appointed, how they would start to legislate once they were in the U.S. Senate.
No, good. Very, very nice insight on all that. Yeah, I've also heard that I think Husted is the name that's been popping up the most recently, I believe. I do remember hearing more about Timken, I don't know, like a few months ago or whatever, when people were first realizing that Trump would win, basically. And they're like, huh, yeah, we're going to need a new senator in Ohio. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think of those three, and those are the only names I've really heard being spoken, I think LaRose would be the nicest choice. That would be my preference. I think I'd be meh with Husted, but I've every time I've heard Timken being mentioned in relation to this race, I've heard not great things.
Well,
Real
she's just a walking disaster. Just anyone but Timken at this point, because it seems like
anyone
it's
but
one of those
Timken.
two. I mean, I don't see anyone else that's going to really get it outside of Holstead or LaRose. I would think so. Like, are there maybe some like front runners we don't know about? I don't know, but it sounds like those are the final three, I guess. So we'll see, though. I guess.
Yeah, it shouldn't. I don't think it's too long until he announces the replacement. If Vance is resigning tonight at midnight, as of this recording.
The general consensus is that he's going to appoint after JD Vance resigns. It's probably going to come the next day. Like, this is what people have been saying, that it's going to come really quickly after JD resigns. So we'll probably know pretty quickly. And yeah, I would say Jen Timken is the person that I really wouldn't want to see in there. Yeah, I remember when she ran for Senate, and really it was just, she didn't really have a platform besides the fact that she was quote unquote a mom on a mission. I don't know if you remember that. The funny
God.
I
campaign.
do remember that. That was really funny.
That was
Yes.
horrible.
A funny campaign. I don't think that she is going to be the type of legislator that's going to live up to what JD Vance was doing in there, for sure.
I don't think anyone can live up to Vance. Vance only 2 years in the Senate, but it was a very, very good 2 years. But you know what? He's on a better things as vice president. Another question I kind of wonder if it's like Husted. Do you think the 26 Senate race would have like a competitive primary?
I can see it being competitive if it's Jane Timken.
Timken.
I don't see
Okay,
it
if
being
it's
competitive if it's Husted, because if it's
All right.
Husted, Husted is
He'll be just good enough that no congressman is going to risk his seat and go off on primary.
the only person I can
One will be
see.
focused on the governor race.
Yeah, the only person I can see running against any senator in the 2026 special election that DeWine would appoint would be Vivek Ramaswamy. He's the only person that I can see running against any of them. And at the end of the day, what he does is probably going to be, he's a big enough name. Whatever he does is probably going to be not determinant on whoever's in the Senate. Given how much of a high name rec he has, he probably thinks, the idea is probably that he's formidable. I don't see him running against Frank LaRose, but if he were appointed. But yeah, if Jane Timken were the senator, I think she would be the most vulnerable in a primary in 2026. In a general election, no Republican is vulnerable. Ohio isn't going to vote blue at the statewide level for a long, long time. So
I do have a question about the whole Senate pick. Since you're in Ohio, do you have any clue if Trump or Vance was involved with this, or was this DeWine's doing?
They've been very involved. I know they were doing interviews at Mar-a-Lago. DeWine.
So it was like, so Trump and Vance are kind of like approving of this kind of, or
yeah, the idea is that Trump and Vance are putting their finger on the scale and they're influencing it. Like they had DeWine and Husted visited Mar-a-Lago. I think a few other people did as well. But I'm skeptical of this because Mike DeWine has nothing to lose. Mike DeWine has nothing to lose from appointing someone who isn't of the Trump element or who Trump doesn't want, because he's term limited. He's probably not going to do anything political after his term for governor runs out. So he really doesn't have any, usually when Trump is able to influence people into appointing people he likes, it's the decision maker who has something to gain from it, or who isn't, he isn't trying to lose something, whether they have something to lose or they have something to gain. Mike DeWine has really nothing to gain, and he has nothing to lose. And so I'm just color me skeptical that Trump is going to be the decision maker in this, as much as I want him to be, because Mike DeWine, he's pretty much unaccountable at this moment.
Yeah, I was just curious because Trump had to know that Vance was going to be replaced by DeWine. So when he made Trump Vance's VP, I was just wondering that if you knew anything about that, but it doesn't sound like he really has much of a say anyways, because DeWine is term limited, like you said.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's correct. Which kind of leads me to if anyone has any ideas. We know I think Yost officially announced he was running for governor of Ohio. Gabe, how do you feel about Yost, and who else do you think is going to run for governor?
Yeah, Dave Yost hasn't officially announced he's running.
Yeah, but he did the teaser video where he walked in front of the governor's office or whatever.
Yeah, I thought that video was pretty cool. Yeah, I have a really good opinion. I like Dave Yost a lot. I think that he's a great guy. I've met him on a number of occasions, and I've met people that he knows, like his staff. He's a great guy. I think that he's done a lot of great things for the state as Attorney General. And he'd be a really Ohio-centric governor. He'd be a upgrade over DeWine for sure, and he'd be a really tough player on a lot of issues. He'd uphold the socially conservative line. He'd uphold the putting Ohio workers and families first line, and I think that he has the character to be governor. But at the end of the day, we need to see who all the candidates are. Like, it's probably the governor's race is probably going to be really good people running against really good people. Like, that's kind of how Ohio politics is now. There's a lot of good people, because it's really about figuring out in Ohio who the fakers are, right? Because in Ohio, you can't get anywhere if you're not a pro-Trump Republican. You can't get anywhere if you're not talking about Trump. You can't get anywhere if you're not talking about MAGA. That's the nature of the state, because that's what the Republican voters here crave. It's not like in South Carolina or Arizona or Utah, for instance, where you can be a Trump skeptic and get ahead. You can't do that in Ohio. You can't do that in Ohio or any state like Ohio, for that matter, because Ohio is essentially ground zero for the Trump revolution. And so it's a lot harder to find out who the fakers are, because they blend in. They're like chameleons. Dave Yost, I know for a fact, isn't one of those people. He's a guy who is very strongly conservative, and he predates the Trump revolution. Most of the people in the state do. But I think that, he's a guy who truly adheres to that vision. And I would say, he's not like some MAGA firebrand by any sorts, but he's a steadfast conservative, and I think that he'd be a good governor. There are some other people who were considering running for governor, though. I've heard a lot of talk about State Treasurer Robert Sprague running. I like him a lot too. I think he's a really good conservative. And I've heard a lot about Vivek Ramaswamy running for governor too. Now, I don't align with Vivek's position on H-1Bs, but I don't think that's an issue that is really dictated by the state level. I'd be interested in hearing him out if he ran for governor too. So there will be a lot of candidates who are really, really strong on a lot of conservative issues. And I think that the key is just going to be who runs and what platform they run on and who they have on their campaign, for me, at least.
Well, that's good. Having a good bench in a state is always nice. So that's good to hear. Real, do you have anyone you particularly want to see in the Ohio governor race?
Honestly, I think Yost's the best option from what I've heard, but I mean, we'll see, I guess. I mean, maybe there could be a Vance type that comes out of nowhere again, but we'll see. The next couple of, what is that, 2026? right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
2026.
So
So
we'll see in the next couple of years, but I think Yost's the best pick from everything I've heard.
Yeah, if a Vance
Yeah.
type were to come out of nowhere, I'd know about it. I don't see that happening. The closest thing that you would get to a JD Vance here would be Vivek Ramaswamy, and that's only in that's not even like that close, right? Because they have a similar background. They actually met each other in college. Like, they were friends in college, and they're both venture capital backgrounds and stuff like that. They're both like MAGA, but they're two very different people at the end of the day.
yeah, 100% correct on that. Vance is one of a kind and whatnot, and I am very glad he is going to be the vice president and then probably president. So, or at least one can dream. He gets
One
two
can only
terms as
hope.
well.
One can only hope.
We definitely need it.
Yep. So you had mentioned this just a couple seconds ago, and this was a really hot topic on Twitter like 2 weeks ago. The H-1B visa program. You were pretty spoken about it. You made a lot of comments on it. We all have, actually. And just kind of wanted to discuss a little bit about the H-1B visa and overall the skilled foreign workers, all those visas that are being brought into the U.S., and kind of want to discuss the downsides of these, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I was coming at it on Twitter from a perspective that's pretty personal to me because I go to University of Dayton. University of Dayton is predominantly, maybe not predominantly, but in a large part, an engineering school. It's known primarily for its engineering program. We have a lot of defense sector and engineering jobs in Dayton, Ohio. It's a big part for that. And so I know a lot of these people who are conservative or not conservative, right? People from all different backgrounds, people who were born here in America, who are paying tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to go get an education for 4 years so that they can find a high-paying job, only to have to compete with foreign labor that companies can pay less. Foreign labor that is here competing with American students and job seekers at the whim of the government, because the government allowed them to do it through the H-1B program and through associated programs of a similar caliber. And that's something that people have been worried about. Job insecurity is a real thing among young people. And I think that things that people like Elon Musk were saying were really out of touch with what the majority of Americans actually think about this issue. And they're really out of touch with what Trump got elected on, right? I was a little disappointed because I feel like the Trump voters wanted something different than the H-1Bs. And I get it, Elon's just one guy, and I like him, but I don't agree with his position on this issue. The reason why he has his position on this issue is obvious. It's personal self-interest. And honestly, who can blame him for advocating for his own interests? But the problem is, his interests aren't in line with my interests. His interests aren't in line with the interests of the broad majority of Americans, especially young Americans, on this issue. And I think that the more important interest to consider when talking about these policies is of young Americans, because we are the next generation of this country's employers, the next generation of this country's employees, the next generation of Americans in general. And I think that this whole talk about how America is nothing more than an economic zone, I felt like we had already hashed this over, but I guess not. I'm a little concerned about where the direction of this rhetoric is heading. I know Vivek Ramaswamy gave his talk, his post on the issue, which was, let's just say, not received very favorably by a lot of people online.
Putting it lightly.
Because essentially it just equated to, I wasn't, we need to reward the nerds and punish the jocks. I mean, it's not a very comprehensive view, right? I mean, we shouldn't be basing our entire economic philosophy off of Revenge of the Nerds. Okay, this is not something that we should be doing. And I feel like it's just a little resentful. I feel like it's driven from resentment. But it's also just inadequate. It doesn't line up with what America actually is, right? America isn't just an economic zone. America isn't just lines on a chart that you can look at, be like, ooh, look at that green line. Look at it go up. This is really good. It's more than that. It's something physical. It's concrete. It's real. It manifests itself. And it contains people. It contains Americans who are real people, who have real lives. And maybe the whole purpose of this country, I think this is good because it helped. It wasn't always a policy discussion, but it also spearheaded into a philosophical discussion about what the goal of being an American is, what American actually means. And it's not just about working your butt off like in China your whole life with no fun, no free time whatsoever, living like a complete bug in a pod so that you can get some job that you'll then work 70 hours a week, just completely destroy yourself, no time whatsoever, get 4 hours of sleep per night. This isn't what being an American is. Being America is a privilege. It's something beautiful, and you can't, it contains lives of people who are real people. And I feel like a lot of the tech bro crowd forgets this because obviously, these are people who, think very statistically, they think very analytically, they think in terms of numbers and charts, which is good. I mean, that's a good thing in certain regards, but not in this regard. Okay. You can't just look and say, oh, well, Americans aren't working as good as foreigners. They're not working as hard as foreigners. Therefore, foreigners should just become the makeup of our entire economy. That's not a smart way of looking at this. It's not an even or just way of looking at this because you cannot account for the fact that Americans are real people. And our country isn't just a corporation. We can't run our country like a corporation. You have to run it like a country, like a nation. That's what it is. America is a nation with a people. And I think that they forget that a lot of the time. So I feel like most of the people who are advocating for the H-1Bs fall in either three groups. And I was talking about this on a Twitter space not too long ago. But there are three groups of people who are advocating for this. One is people who have personal interests, or I should say financial interests in favor of it. So tech bro, billionaires, large corporate owners, people like Elon Musk or a lot of these other people who have personal financial interests to gain from importing cheap labor that they can then pay less because the foreign labor will take lesser contracts. Or second option, second sort of bubble that we fill in is people who have an ethnic interest. There are a lot of people who just obviously are online pushing out very bad faith commentary because they're obviously advocating for their own ethnic group, right? They talk about meritocracy. They talk about how this is actually the meritocratic thing to do. They talk about how this is actually DEI if you don't push this. Well, most of the people who are pushing this, a lot of them who are ethnic Indians, and that's not to denigrate them, but it's true that they are pushing for it simply because they want more people in the country who look like them. They want to see more people in this country who look like them out of a sense of ethnic loyalty. And it's important to acknowledge that that's what's driving a lot of it for a lot of people. It's not based on economics. It's not based on statistics for a lot of these people. It's based on this simple, very tribalistic view, this very tribalistic desire for these people to have more of their own type of people, their own origin of people in the country. That's what a lot of it is. And I think it's important for people to acknowledge that. The third group is the most pathetic, and it's people who simply believe whatever Elon Musk tells them to believe. I've noticed a lot of this. You know, if you look at Twitter right now, it's just gotten so much worse because of these, like, you know, people who just can't think for themselves. They have to be told what to think, right? They have to be told what to think by Elon Musk. I posted a screenshot on Twitter a few days ago of this lady, and I don't even know if she's real or AI or what she is. She was posting about how Elon Musk is our teacher, and he is here to educate us. He is our leader, our guider in knowledge.
Wow.
And I'm like, geez, you know, what is this, North Korea? This is ridiculous. So there, you know, I think the H-1B debate is just completely crafted by people who have either personal or financial interests in support of H-1Bs. And then there's everybody else, the vast majority of this country, who doesn't have an interest in this. And I think that the interests of the vast majority of American people, the vast majority of young people, the vast majority of people who are in normal parts of the country and are aligning with the Trump view, especially most of the people who voted for Trump and gave him his mandate in 2024, oppose the H-1Bs and oppose the very premise of the H-1B visa, or most of these visa programs for that matter. And for that reason, I think that it's due time for Republicans to actually take a stand on this. So far, I haven't seen many Republicans do it.
Yeah, no, you're definitely correct on that, and I do think H-1B visas hit younger people probably harder than most people as we're trying to get into jobs and careers. You know, we don't like. I mean, when choosing between an entry person or an entry person that takes 15, 20K less, you know what a company's going to pick. You know, it's not the top 0.1% of computer engineers that are being imported. You know, a lot of the jobs they do end up being almost entry level and stuff. And I mean, I personally have friends who did like STEM related stuff, computer engineering from my time in college a couple of years ago. I don't think one of them works in their field, even though they have an education in it. And thankfully, I have a degree in political science, which means this is technically working in my field. But, you know, I feel bad for people who are in STEM like that, because their whole like genre of jobs, their whole careers can easily be circumvented by foreigners and whatnot. And I get why companies do it, you know, save yourself 20% on employee costs. And I think a lot of the reason it's happening in such large numbers as well is, I think back when companies were getting really bad press from exporting jobs to India, like physically moving the job location to India, they were getting too much bad press. But if you import the Indians or whoever is on the visa, the press isn't as bad, but you still get to save money, you know?
And you can call everyone racist that disagrees with you. So
100%. There were some really pathetic comments made by some of the tech bros in their defense of H-1B visas. It was rough.
Yeah, this whole debate's been like bad faith from most of these people. I mean, just honestly, like a lot of these people, they're just making the dumbest arguments I've ever heard. It's like none of this even make any sense what they're saying. And even then, it's like what they're saying is not even backed by even their own data. Like a bunch of visas were getting handed out to like cooks, to janitors. It's like, are these really the top 0.1% of people from India we're importing here? Janitors and cooks?
Better be careful, because Elon Musk is going to war on this issue. He's going to remove you from the Republican Party. Did you know that? Did you know that?
I saw that.
So true. So
yeah,
true.
Well, yeah, you're not Republican. It's like, this guy's been Republican for what, 3 months? 4?
Oh, come on. I think it's almost closer to 6 now.
Sorry,
Let's
6.
be generous.
Fine. But it's like, just because you're the richest guy on earth does not mean like you can decide like, oh yeah, you have to agree with me on this or you're not a Republican. It's like, I thought the whole point was he's pro free speech, that he allows you to say what you want. I thought that was the whole point.
I think the issue hit a little too close to him or whoever runs his account at that time, because he was he got a lot of the tech bros got very emotional on H-1B visas very fast. I think for some of them it genuinely was like a personal thing, and I think for other of them it was mainly like a financial interest thing, because there's a lot of money you can save. If you hire 5,000 people on H-1B visas, and each one is undercutting the standard salary by like $10,000, that's a lot of money you're saving on your labor costs and whatnot. So yeah, but I think the GOP will figure it out, especially because I don't know how long our political interests will align with tech bros. So as long as we're allied, I think we can't be as aggressive on H-1B visas as I would prefer. But I also don't know how long an alliance between us will last, because I think the biggest reason tech bros are even decently Republican is because we're pro-crypto and the Democrats aren't. Because most of these tech bros were pretty Democrat, 4 years ago or whatever. It just, they changed their opinions to have better business sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and there's one thing I am worried about, like Musk and them. It's like they're influencing Trump quite a bit on this issue, I think. Because didn't he say like, "Oh yeah, I'm pro H-1B visa now," which is a complete 360 or 180 from 2016.
There were a couple points during 2016. He said he understood H-1B visas and he defended it. He also was aggressive towards them during the 2016 campaign. What really mattered was Miller was in charge of dealing with them in that sense. And he started, using the law correctly on H-1B visas. And we had a massive spike in denial of H-1B visas with Miller in the White House. And Miller's back. So I think we will see the spike in denials again, which is good, because ultimately I'm trusting Miller and Homan to do immigration stuff. I think Trump will be, I'm not going to say busy, but he's going to be busy with other stuff, It's the whole point of having a team. You can outsource your work. And I trust Miller. I trust Homan. I think we will be fine. And I think once Vance becomes the nominee, I think that's when the GOP itself will become far more hostile to these work visas they are really bad for younger people. They're bad for all American workers. What was the statistic? Since Biden's administration, I think native-born workers are down like 1 million jobs, and foreign-born workers are up like 2-3 million jobs or something.
I thought it was a bigger gap than that. I thought it was way bigger.
I think it is a bigger gap. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, and I don't have notes in front of me for it. But, you get the idea, is that the Biden administration already has been pretty hostile to native workers in that sense, just Americans in general. And a lot of people have come through these borders, and I think Miller, Homan, Vance will be able to stop it or slow it down at least, Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's, they, like I said, the H-1B visas, all of those are bad, because as Gabe said, a lot of tech bros are viewing it purely as an economic thing. And I wrote an article on this on our website where I argued that America is not an idea, and the two biggest proponents of that are generally tech bros who just want to import people for free and get cheaper labor. They want to push the idea that America itself is an idea, which I think is very detrimental to the GOP if we continue working along with that. And the second group of people who subscribe to the America's an idea is really like Cold War boomers. I think they are like one of the bigger proponents of it too, because when they were growing up with the Cold War and everything, America was a bastion of freedom, leader of democracy. Anyone could become an American. But that's not the reality of the situation. Not everyone can become an American. So those two are our opponents in this political ring, and I don't know how long they're going to last in the GOP. So hopefully overtly hostile actions to the H-1B visas will be happening within 8 years or however long it takes. But yeah. So I want to move on to the next thing. As we are all younger men involved in the GOP in some circumstance or some way, I wanted to kind of ask, what are you guys seeing from your, similar peers as Gen Z GOP people? What are you seeing, like, any differences in their views compared to traditional GOP? That type of stuff. Real, you wanna go
Yeah,
first here?
so I would say just in general, there's definitely been a shift with younger people. That's undeniable at this point. That there's been a
Mm-hmm.
shift with young people. But just even the last year, I've really noticed, even people that they didn't support Republicans or Trump just even 7 months ago. But it's a bunch of people that they voted for Trump. They never liked him, but they did. After the assassination attempt, they kind of voted for him after it. So I have seen this shift with younger people. Now, when it comes to specific policy, they're not really that political, I would say. Like, yeah, they voted for Trump or they might have voted Republican, but they did it more so because they just like Trump. And they did it despite, the Democrats for what they've done the last 4 years. That's what I've noticed. But, I could maybe be in a unique circle. Like, what did you see, guys?
Yeah, I mean, generally, for the course of what I've seen, I mean, it's been good over the past year, but there's major issues that still need to be addressed when it comes to getting youth active in politics. I mean, I think the major consensus on what's going on right now is that there's a lot of young people who believe in conservative ideas now. There's a lot of young people who are now on the right. I think that the number of young people who are on the political right has skyrocketed. The problem is you don't really see it that much because they don't get involved, right? It takes Charlie Kirk coming to a campus in order to get these people to show themselves. And so the real issue is that Republicans and conservatives need to start activating these kids. They need to start getting them active in the process. They need to start getting them active in what's going on. And if there's not systemic infrastructure to be able to do that, it's going to be tough because, it's not like how it used to be, right? Back in the day, back in, the 2000s or the 90s, the college Republicans were thriving because you could go to the college Republicans. You could be a college Republican. You can make that your identity, and it wouldn't get you blackballed on campus, right? It wouldn't get you completely, shunned by your peers because it was just a debate society. Essentially, it was like Model UN, but for tax credits. It was Model UN for, removing government regulation and things like that. Now, being a conservative and being a Republican is so much stronger and more confined than just tax cuts, right? It's about a culture war. It's about so many of these things that are really, really personal for a lot of people. And I'm not saying we should go back to the way things were. Absolutely, we should not. Things are a lot better now. But that does come with a price. It comes with the price that young people aren't as motivated to get involved on campus and get involved in their communities because they're worried about their reputation, because their reputations are more on the line with the heavier hitting stuff that the Republicans are pushing out. And I think that the key for us going forward is going to be figuring out how to mobilize these people. That's why Twitter has become so big for young right-wing people, because it's anonymous and because it's so much easier to the problem is it's so much easier to align yourself as a young conservative with a political movement that you can be anonymous with online or something like that than it is to run for central committee or precinct chair for your local Republican Party. It's a lot easier to be online tweeting and reposting people anonymously or even on a face account than it is to start up a college Republicans chapter and get involved with them or run for a position there. These are the things that we have to figure out as conservatives. How do we get these people involved? Because if we don't do it, we're not going to get anything in the future, right? We have to be investing in this stuff now, because these young conservatives that we have now, they're going to be the leaders of the Republican Party in the future. These are going to be the people that lead the Republican Party into the future. You know, all the Republican elected officials that you see now, all the big ones, especially Nikki Haley, John Thune, all these people were part of the same tight-knit community of Republican trainees back in the day. They trained under Morton Blackwell at Leadership Institute back when that was first started in the 1970s, and when it started to grow into the 80s and 90s. All these people started at the ground level. They started in little tiny DC rooms with instructors. And we need to figure out how to propel that, because if we don't do that, that's going to be an issue. Because what we're going to get is we're going to have a Republican elite in the next few years that is susceptible to, that is not properly trained, for one thing, on policy, on public affairs, things like that, but is also susceptible to being intimidated or blacklisted or absorbed by a potential resurgence of establishmentarian moderate republicanism. We need to start the groundwork now in building out a generational Republican Party that lasts for a long, long time and is founded and is structured around those core Trump ideas that we believe in, right? That is structured around the ideas of the Trump revolution. And if we don't do that, it's, you're building a house of cards that's going to fall down.
Yeah, so I know this is kind of like a loaded question, but like, Gabe, in your opinion, what's like the best way to do this? Like, I'm not saying like you have to go in detail like exactly what we have to do, but if you were put in charge of trying to figure out the next generation of Republicans, how would you try to reach out to them? How would you get them out to actually be part of the Republican Party?
Yeah, I would say, and this is a message to especially older Republicans too, invest in infrastructure to be able to get them involved, right? The college Republicans is great at this because they're able to directly pipeline students into Republican jobs, get them involved in the career fields, get them involved, build their resumes directly. They're able to get them campaign experience. Campaign experience is not only that, but it's also communication training, it's leadership training. Invest in things like the college Republicans. That's going to be a huge thing. And then also invest in other conservative groups as well that work with young people. Invest in groups like Turning Point USA. Invest in groups like Turning Point Action or their Gen Z coalition. Invest in groups that are able to provide a thoroughly conservative worldview to young people, and invest in groups that are able to directly activate those young people in the political process, in public affairs, in public service, in policy, in campaigns, any of that stuff. That's stuff that we have to invest in. And I think there's a prime opportunity for new groups to come out too and be able to help with this too. I think that, too often young people are driven to, what Nelk Boys, says about politics, but they don't go out and actually translate that into action. We need to figure out how to do that. We need to invest in what we have right now that's already working on that. I think that the biggest way of doing that is with college Republicans, but there's other groups too that are really working on that.
Yeah, no, that's you're 100% correct on that. I also want to bring up that I think it's important. You were mentioning on how a fear of college Republicans is kind of getting like blacklisted, sort of, at least somewhat socially at college. I used to do Turning Point at my college, and I went to school in New York City. So that was really fun doing Turning Point stuff. This was before COVID, and I remember we would set up tables, and we even had professors walk by giving us really nasty looks. And I remember one professor gave us a really nasty look. We had a socialism sucks flag. This is back when Turning Point was more libertarian style stuff. And I had her for the next semester. But thankfully is a strong word, but COVID had started. So it was an online class. So I never turned on my camera for that class because I'm like, she gave me a really nasty look, and now I'm in her class. I do not like that at all. And that's an issue, is like, it's hard for a lot of younger Republicans to kind of I guess feel a sense of belonging, and even in their local GOP. I'm currently in Florida. The county I live in, average age is about 40, right? And I went to one of my local GOP meetings not too long ago, and I was the youngest guy there by about 3 decades. We had, I'm not kidding, we had a guy there who door knocked for Eisenhower.
Are you serious?
He door knocked for Eisenhower. So another issue is the GOP, especially local GOPs, can be very old, and it's hard to I guess feel involved when you're the youngest guy by like 3 decades, but you still need to go there and show up if you can, because if there's another young guy there or whatever, you can at least start kind of building up a group of younger people being involved, if you kind of get what I'm saying here. Because if people like hanging out with people similar to themselves, and having someone, I don't know, even within a decade of my age would be nice in my local area. My local Republicans don't have one, but you know what? I'm going to keep going because it's important to be involved and whatnot. You know, you have to be there and actually be involved. You know, tweeting all day is nice if you're politically involved on the right, but actually being able to show up and do stuff, even if it's not often. I feel like most county GOPs only meet like once a month. I don't know, how often do your guys' county GOPs meet?
Yeah, it's usually once a month.
Yeah, so even if it's just dedicating like one day or whatever to whatever you can, it's important to go there, even if it's basically just to show face, because you never know if someone else is looking to get involved but they see a bunch of old people, they might not get involved. And we need every young person getting involved in the GOP that we can get, because let's not forget that seniors, I think, still swung against Trump and they really had no reason to. And that's, I mean, it's probably going to continue happening, and we got to make up those grounds somewhere. And the best areas we can make it up is either Hispanic working class, or we make it up with young voters. You know, get even if it's not changing that many minds for young voters, it's being able to beat them in turnout with young voters. And I feel the GOP has a lot of opportunities to make young conservatives feel really passionate about at least getting out there and voting, or, you know, getting out there, helping out a local candidate or whatever. We have the tools, we have the means, we just gotta kind of step on it, you know? So, yeah, get involved with your local GOP is my message to any younger conservatives listening, because that's what I do.
Yeah, but
and it's important.
I'm just trying to think, like, the problem Republicans do have is, like, a lot of conservatives, like Gabe was talking about, and you guys were, and you, Mark, you guys were talking about how, like, yeah, it's when you can't really be a conservative in college anymore because people give you dirty looks, they don't like you. It's like, how can you even deal with that? Because if a bunch of people just don't want to, like, admit that they're conservative and don't want to work with you, it's like, how do you get them out to actually, like, work with you guys? You know, it just becomes a big problem the more I think about it. Like, if you just can't get them out.
It definitely is an issue. And that's one thing, like, you know, some on the right are like, hey, don't go to college. But if you can, you should, because we do need an intellectual right. We just need an intellectual right that focuses on the correct things and not just Reagan tax cuts. But a big thing, I mean, for me, the reason I stuck through it all was because I knew I was getting into politics. I've been super political since Trump came down the escalators. So that's what got me through it. But I knew several people who were conservative, but they did not want to be involved in our activities or anything like that because they were afraid of what it meant socially. And one of the best ways we can beat that type of we can beat this issue is, one, show yourself if you can. You know, the more conservatives there are, the more inclined everyone will be to be with them in that sense. I'm wording this poorly. One second. It's the bigger the group, the more people will feel safe in that group. You know, if it's just two guys at a table or whatever, and once again, I'm using tabling because that's what I had experience with, people don't go up to it. But if it's like 10 guys, you know, people feel more comfortable in that setting. There's a bigger crowd, I guess, to get lost into. And another thing is we need more Republicans working in colleges to be able to counteract this. You know, I mean, I knew every single one of my teachers' political views. My law teacher in college, her favorite SCOTUS judge was Sotomayor. Sotomayor's like objectively, well, now the second worst judge on the court. But we don't even need just conservative teachers. Even just neutral teachers, neutral professors would be good. So it definitely is a slow haul situation. It's going to take a very long time to fix this issue, but that's why I think being involved with your local GOP is so important, because maybe you can convince some local, you know, guy who wants to get involved in politics. If he just sees more young people at the local GOP, he might be like, okay, well, I'll go once a month or whatever. It gives an outlet, so they also don't lose interest in conservative values. They don't lose interest in politics, which, you know, we got to keep these people voting, you know, GOP for 40 plus years minimum. So, but I understand your concern, Real. All right. But yeah, is there anything anyone else wants to cover for this episode, or are we all kind of good with that?
We're caught up on everything. That's kind of the main stuff, I believe, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right, cool. Well, in that case, my name has been Mark. We've had our special guest Gabe here, along with my co-host Real. Thank you for tuning in to the second episode of America First Insight Unfiltered. Make sure you go check out our website, www.americafirstinsight.com. We have a scorecard, information on upcoming elections, a shop, everything. You know, even just watching the video, though, very great, helpful, or listening to the podcast, depending on your platform. Real, if you want to go ahead, plug in your info real quick.
Follow me at RealPData on Twitter, and of course, Real American Politics on YouTube. That's the best way to follow me. So go follow my Twitter account. Go do it.
And Gabe, you want to go ahead and say you're at?
Sure, yeah. Follow me on Twitter. My Twitter is at Gabe Guidarini. If you need help spelling the last name, he'll probably have it probably have it spelled correctly in the YouTube title, or however you're watching it. So, lots of Italian. You have to deal with that. So, and now you have to deal with it too. Congratulations.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you guys for being here. And thank you, Gabe, for being our very first ever special guest. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. No problem.
Thanks for the ride. Catch you next time. Same place, same vibe. We're signing off, but don't you stray. America's voice every day. Keep it real, keep it bold. Stories shared and